And you guys have been handling these types of cases for over 30 years. Can this really affect someone's ability to work?
It can absolutely destroy your ability to work. If you have a certain portion of your brain injured, and by the way, there doesn't have to be a spot on your brain to have it happen, then that function, that motor function or cognitive function from your brain affects, let's say you're a computer operator. Let's say you're trained in that field. You can't stare at computers. You get dizzy when it happens. It can certainly affect your job, and sometimes it spills over into other vocations you might want to attempt.
This is known as a silent injury or the invisible injury, and that's the problem. Head injuries can resolve after 6 months or a year. Sometimes they're permanent. It's important to watch to try and determine, and once again use your experts. But if you're going to work for 6 months with an invisible injury that no one can really pinpoint, but you're not focused, you're not doing your job, or you're depressed, or you're in a bad mood, or people are unable to approach you, and that's going on for 6 months, 9 months, a year, chances are you're not working at that same location anymore. And that's because the bosses, the fellow workers, don't want you there. They don't want to deal with you, and nobody recognizes that it's a head injury, that you've got the traumatic brain injury. These can be more devastating than actually seeing the injury on a person and realizing they have a broken arm or they have a broken leg or they're walking around in a cast. Because these are the type of injuries that sometimes people say are inexcusable for your conduct, and yet it's not your conduct, it's your injury that's causing the problem.
And because these are quote-unquote invisible injuries, are insurance companies more apt to fight them?
They do fight them. They fight them very hard. You got to be able to prove them, and you got to prove them the right way, and there's ways to do that. One of the ways is through family members saying your personality changed. One of the ways is saying, like when you have sleep disorders, headaches, constant headaches, temporary blindness, dizziness, some of the symptoms we've gone over. But an important way is for you, as the injured person, to report these symptoms to your medical health care provider, because the insurance companies will look in your medical records to see if you've got them. And if you don't say anything about you being dizzy, forgetful, memory loss, not sleeping well, not eating well, then they're going to say you don't have it, even if you do. And Brad, you know, there's another thing called neuropsychological testing. And that can be used to prove a brain injury as well.
Sure. The neuropsychological testing is a very modern day way of trying to determine if the person is functioning. Sometimes it's hard to establish the baseline of how they were functioning before the accident. The neuropsychological testing can help determine whether or not the person, such as focus, concentration, memory, being able to organize thought patterns and thought processes, all the things that we normally can do and that we should be able to do for the stage we are in life. That's an important part. It's every bit as important to make sure that if you believe you have that injury, of closed head injury, or if family members are telling you that you have something wrong, that you get the testing, you go check it out. Especially if you have things such as med pay, or you have the ability to get this care and treatment taken care of on a lien, where you have the chance of being reimbursed for your medical care.
You know what's interesting, Robert, in these areas is I can't tell you the number of times over the years I've interviewed a family, I've interviewed a couple together, and I've said, have you noticed any symptoms in him, her, the injured person, to the family or to the spouse? And I say, have you noticed sleeping problems, eating problems, memory problems, less tolerant, more mood swings, more aggressive, and they sometimes just roll their eyes and they say to me, you have named everything we see, everything he or she has experienced. It's so important. Those are things that you report to the doctors.
So as attorneys, you would both agree that it's important to interview many family members in almost every injury case?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think you, once again, are doing a disservice to your client if you have reason to suspect that there's been any kind of head injury and you aren't checking that out and talking to family members. You know, if your client reports, even without being hit, an impact to the head, if they report they had headaches, or they were tired or sleepy after the accident, or they had some kind of loss of consciousness, or forgetfulness after the accident, it's important you start talking to people who are close to them to find out if they've returned to normal, if they've returned to where they were prior to the accident.
But you know, if you don't put those in the medical records legitimately, if you don't report them to your doctors, your healthcare providers, even your therapists, you can report them to anyone that you come in contact with, the insurance company is not going to believe you, and ultimately they think they can beat you. They think they can win, so they're not going to pay.
And as friends, you have to sometimes tell the injured person. Sometimes you know, the injured person doesn't realize they're not focusing, or they don't have as much attention span, or they're moody. Sometimes a friend has to come up and say, you know, since the accident, you've had these problems. It's been difficult to deal with you, or you've been miserable to be around, or I can't send you to the store anymore to pick up 4 items without writing them on the back of your hand. These are important things that sometimes you got to, friends and family members have to help the injured person understand that they've got an injury that they're not even aware of.
So there are ways to prove closed head injuries. There are ways to prove head injuries and brain injuries, now called traumatic brain injuries. You can do it. You probably need experienced professionals on your side, and you probably need experienced attorneys who understand traumatic brain injuries to help you.